I used to think silence was my shame. Now I know it's where I got my power. They called me a dropout, a failure. Said I couldn't handle orders, couldn't survive structure. That I was weak, fragile, a disappointment. Every holiday dinner was the same. The clink of champagne flutes raised for my younger sister Carrara's newest military promotion. While I sat in the corner, forgotten like the guest who didn't RSVP. To them, I was the broken cadet. But they never asked why I walked away. Not once. And when I stopped offering explanations, they decided I had nothing to say. My name is Cassidy Rohr, and this is the story of how I became a ghost in my own family. Until the day I decided to haunt them with the truth. It was a dry, wind-cut morning in New Mexico, the kind where even the sun feels like a warning. I wore tactical slacks, a black windbreaker, and a visitor badge clipped cleanly to my chest. Neutral, invisible, deliberate. The bleachers creaked under me as I sat down at the training yard, watching cadets move like clockwork across red dirt, boots hammering in unison. Front and center was Carrara, Lieutenant Rohr, barking orders with perfect cadence. Her posture was textbook, her voice sharp enough to slice wind. She didn't see me, or maybe she did, and decided I didn't exist. I was 3 rows back, and in that moment, I became the shadow again. Until Sergeant Mason Frey turned, he was halfway through drill, mid-command, when his eyes caught mine. His boots stopped moving. So did the air. The bleachers fell into an eerie silence. Cadets turned. Even Carrara's voice faltered. Then he did something no one expected. He marched, straight toward me. His salute hit like a thunderclap. "Commander Rohr, ma'am, I wasn't informed you'd be observing today." The heat drained from the sun. My sister's hand trembled on her training rifle. The metal slipped, clattered on the concrete. Cadets whispered. I met Frey's eyes, calm, unshaken. "At ease, Sergeant. I'm off duty. Keep this quiet." But quiet had already left the room. The invitation came 2 days later. "Come home. Sunday. Celebration for Carrara? Wear something normal." No warmth? No, we miss you. Just orders. Just like when I was 19 and still under their roof. I hadn't set foot in that house in 7 years. I left without slamming the door because silence, I knew, could echo longer than rage. But I went anyway. Not for them. For her. The driveway was still cracked like old bones. The porch light still flickered like it had commitment issues. The mailbox leaned left like my father's politics, and my mother's chin whenever she disapproved of something. Inside it smelled like ham and too much cinnamon. The kind of scent that suffocates instead of welcomes. The dining room looked like a military museum, banners with Carrara's name, a slideshow looping her boot camp graduation, her medals, her life on repeat. Not a single photo of me. I wore gray and black, nothing flashy, a shadow uniform. Still, judgment hung in the air like steam. Dad didn't stand, didn't hug me, just glanced my way and asked, "So, what are you doing these days?" I opened my mouth. But he kept going. Carrara's promotion, field scores, top 10%, medal potential. My mother beamed, glass in hand. Aunt Kendra from the buffet table chimed in. "Didn't you used to play waitress at Applebee's? Looks like it stuck." Polite laughter. Nothing kind about it. I smiled. "I'm better at serving now," I said, voice calm and sharp like a scalpel. Then came the moment I always dreaded. "Cass, can you grab some forks?" No one else moved. No one asked if I minded. It was assumed. So I fetched the forks, poured the water. I listened to Carrara's laughter echo down the hall, not knowing I'd once led units into the kind of quiet you don't return from. When I came back, there was no chair for me. Every name card set. Every seat taken. My mother looked at me like I'd interrupted something sacred. There's a folding chair on the porch, by the grill. So I sat, out there, alone, with the wind brushing my ankles and the smell of propane stinging my eyes. They all thought I'd crumbled, that the cadet who walked out sophomore year never got back up. They weren't wrong, not entirely. There were nights I didn't sleep, days I couldn't eat. I had panic attacks that stole my breath like muggers in the dark. I'd curl in corners, nails digging into my own palms to remember what control felt like. And then came the night drill. I froze. A second too long. My commanding officer called me civilian material. The room laughed. By sunrise, I was gone. I walked into an office the next week and signed a contract so classified, I wasn't allowed to keep a copy. It was called the Echo Civilian Defense Program. No records, no parades, no uniform. Just silence. Just purpose. Just danger that didn't come with applause. Cassidy Roar, on paper, ceased to exist. I became a ghost. I moved through cities, languages, aliases. I changed hair color like seasons. I learned to vanish in plain sight. I learned to be trusted without being known. I wasn't brave, I was invisible. And I was good at it. But that day, at the family table, they thought I was still a waitress. A cautionary tale. A ghost in combat boots. Out on the porch, my coat buzzed. One vibration. Observer assignment. Fort Garnett. Echo protocol. Passive assessment. The base where Carrara trained. They thought I came home because I missed them. Truth is, I never stopped working, and now the world that thought I had no place in it needed me again. Fort Garnett came alive before dawn. From a distance, it looked like any other base. Routine, repetition, discipline painted across every corner. But to me, it pulsed with something else. Memory. Drills cracked through the morning like war hymns. Boots pounded dust into red mist. Voices called cadence, sharp and proud. I parked in the civilian lot. My clearance badge was tucked deep inside a zipped pocket. Nothing on me said, Commander. Nothing except the silence I carried like armor. I moved past the south gate with practiced ease. The guards didn't look twice. That's how you survive an echo. You learn to be forgettable. Carrara's unit was in formation on the lower range. Her silhouette was unmistakable. Chin lifted, back straight, rifle steady. She hadn't changed, but I had. I stood near the bleachers. Still, quiet, watching. Sergeant Mason Frey paced the front line, voice like gravel and steel. He was infamous for cracking egos faster than ribs. Then he stopped. Mid-step, mid-command. His head tilted slightly, just enough to lock eyes with me. No recognition at first, just a calculation, a long, deliberate scan. Then it clicked. He stiffened. He pivoted. And like the morning itself had split open, he walked straight toward me. Again. In front of 50 cadets and half a dozen instructors, he halted 2 feet from where I stood. He saluted. Commander Roar, ma'am. I wasn't informed you'd be observing today. Same words. But this time the weight behind them pressed down on every shoulder within earshot. I felt the ripple. The pause, the disorientation that always follows when the invisible becomes undeniable. I returned the salute with a nod. I'm off duty, I said. No announcement necessary. Continue as ordered. He didn't flinch. Didn't speak again. He turned cleanly, boots slicing the dirt, and returned to formation. But the drills didn't resume right away. The silence lingered. Like breath held too long. Carrara didn't turn. She didn't need to. I knew that stillness in her body. That tension in her spine, that disbelief. She just realized the shadow in her rear view had stripes. I stayed only 15 more minutes, long enough for whispers to bloom like desert flowers. By the time I exited the base, the rumors had begun. That night, I knew she wouldn't sleep. Not because she saw me, but because for the first time she had to ask herself, who the hell is my sister really? In the barracks, her bunkmate snored, but Carrara lay awake. I'd seen that expression before in mirrors in debrief rooms, in the faces of agents after first contact with the unknown. The 1,000-yard stare, the twitch of the jaw, the breath that doesn't land. When reality fractures, everything else follows. She sat up, reached for the old gym bag I'd given her last year, disguised like a sisterly gesture. Clothes, snacks, maybe photos. That's what she thought. She'd never looked. Not until now. Unzipping the side pocket, her fingers found it. Cold, brushed steel, the size of a playing card. No logo, just a faint, etched grid. She connected it to her tablet. The screen flickered, blinked, then flashed white text. Access request. Echo terminal clearance, civilian proxy. She froze. Echo? Her credentials got her a whisper-thin window, not a door. Enough to glimpse, but not enough to understand. Text flooded the screen too fast to read. Then, access logged, oversight alert triggered, and it all went black. No warning, no menu, just darkness. She yanked the drive out, heart pounding like it might call out my name. She thought she'd tripped a simulation. She hadn't. Across base, I was already awake. My secure line buzzed once, then again. Unauthorized breach. Internal node ping. Roar A1. My pulse tightened. That tag was dead. Scrubbed. Buried years ago. But someone had used it. From inside Fort Garnett. Only 2 people on Earth had that drive. One was me. The other was Carrara. By 2:43 a.m., I was seated across from Major Evelyn Shaw in the Command Coordination Suite. She was sharp as frost, cold as protocol. She slid a datapad across the table. "Commander Roar," she said, "we traced the signal. A legacy clearance path was used to access a dormant echo node. You were tagged." I didn't blink. It wasn't me. "That's what worries me," she said flat. "No permissions, no options, just orders. A 48-hour silent trace directive. Full diagnostic. No official record." Back in my quarters, I decrypted the metadata myself. It was sloppy. And I recognized it immediately. The steel drive. The one I gave her. She hadn't just opened a file, she'd stepped on a tripwire, one that had been waiting for years. I didn't knock on her barracks door. I had her brought to the Echo Wing. Sterile. Windowless. Bare. She walked in like a model cadet, shoulders tight, eyes locked, mouth pressed thin. Then she saw me, then she saw Sergeant Frey. And her composure cracked. "Sit," I said. She obeyed, but I saw her grip the edge of the seat like it might float her out of there. "You don't have to explain," I said, "but you do need to understand." I held up the steel drive. That wasn't a training file, that was a federal node tied to Echo. She swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to—" "I know, but meaning doesn't undo damage." I leaned in, voice low. "That drive connects to files that could expose agents still in field. You didn't open a door. You kicked a hole in a wall that was never meant to crack." Her voice shook. "You're really all of this?" I didn't answer. "Why didn't you tell me?" I stared at her. Because surviving sometimes requires silence, especially when no one ever asked. Frey folded his arms. "If she screws this up, Commander, both of you are finished." "I'm aware." I turned back to her. "I'm not reporting you." Her eyes widened. "Why?" "Because you're going to help fix this." She hesitated, then nodded. And just like that, we weren't sisters in conflict anymore. We were allies in the kind of war no one trains for. We started with the access logs. Carrara read line after line, fingers trembling but steady. Frey stood behind us like a silent sentinel. The breach hadn't gone deep. But then I saw it, an old file signature buried in a legacy server, masked, misfiled, forgotten. But I knew it. Curtis Vaughn. Carrara blinked. Who? Former civilian contractor. Worked echo simulations. I flagged him years ago for unauthorized code injections. Frey frowned. Thought he disappeared. He did, I said, but not before leaving landmines. Scripts. Dormant traps. Buried deep in code, waiting for the wrong access to wake them. Carrara's face paled. This wasn't random, I said. He laid bait. For someone like you. Young, curious, connected to me. She whispered, he wants to take you down. He wants to erase me. Curtis Vaughn had always known how to disappear. That's what made him dangerous, and now he was speaking again, through code. Carrara leaned forward, scanning the log again. Her fingers hesitated above the screen, tracing the name like it might burn her. This file, this is where I triggered it? I nodded. It wasn't just a tripwire, it was bait. She swallowed. Meant for me? Not exactly, I said. He couldn't predict you'd find it, but he knew someone like you would. Young, idealistic, and close enough to me to unlock access without raising suspicion. Frey crossed his arms, eyes narrowing. He wanted her to trip it so you'd be blamed. Exactly, I said. That breach didn't just ping the system. It reactivated a file he buried 5 years ago. What's in the file? She asked. I exhaled slowly. Fabrication. Manipulated logs. It points to me. And it implies something worse than a mistake. Carrara blinked. Worse than a mistake? A cover-up, I said. One tied to Operation Halbert. Frey's expression darkened. Civilian casualties? Yes. My voice felt heavier now. Older. Worn. And if he gets the tribunal to believe it, I won't just lose my clearance, I'll be erased. Officially. Permanently. Carrara looked down at her hands. I didn't mean... I touched her wrist gently. I know. We dove deeper. Line by line, bite by bite. At 4:22 a.m., we hit the payload, a corrupted directive stamped with my signature. Only it wasn't my hand. He'd copied my voice pattern from old mission audio, pieced together a fabricated order to initiate clearance without recon. It was surgical, precise, almost perfect, but not perfect. Carrara spotted it first. This timestamp? It's off. The system logged it 2 seconds before the perimeter satellite synced. That's impossible. No operative could have issued orders without confirmation data. I smiled. Good catch. Frey leaned over. That's the crack we need. Vaughn thought he covered it all, but he forgot the satellite lag. Carrara's voice steadied now. So what do we do? We rebuild the timeline, I said. Every second, every ping, every breath. She nodded. No hesitation. And that's when I realized she wasn't just helping, she was learning. By sunrise, we had our case. We compiled a parallel access log showing Vaughn's remote pings, his backdoor entries, the cloned audio snippets. Every stitch of it wrapped into a quiet dagger that proved one thing. He wasn't just rewriting the mission. He was rewriting me. The tribunal was held in the south chamber of Command Sector 9. It looked more like a courtroom than a briefing room. Polished oak, digital screens, steel gray walls that swallowed sound. Curtis Vaughn stood tall in a civilian suit, clean-shaven, arms loose at his sides like he'd already won. He lifted a report, redacted, official-looking. This document, he said, voice flat and composed, proves Commander Rohr failed to report non-combatant casualties during Operation Halbert. It was a conscious choice to protect her unit's record. I watched him like I'd studied his code. Methodical, calculated, hollow. Then the presiding colonel turned to me. "Commander Rohr, your response?" I stood. My pulse was steady, my voice grounded. "I'd like to submit original directive logs from that mission, including this." I held up a laminated slip. The authentic perimeter authorization, signed by Vaughn himself, 2 hours prior to my unit deployment. The colonel took it. I continued. Calmly. He gave the clearance, then cut the comms. There was no chance to object. Then Frey stepped forward, silent until now. "Permission to submit recovered audio file," he said. It played. My voice, from 5 years ago, firm, clear. "Hold fire. Possible civilian presence. Wait for recon confirmation." Silence. Then Carrara stood. Her hands trembled only slightly as she held up a printed log. "This shows Vaughn accessed legacy files under a falsified contractor ID 2 years after he was dismissed. He didn't just fabricate evidence. He buried it in a location only a Rohr protocol clearance could trigger." Her words rang through the room like a gavel. This wasn't a report, it was a setup. Vaughn opened his mouth and closed it. There was no rebuttal, only the truth. And this time, it didn't need to scream. The tribunal ruled in my favor. No press, no medals, no headlines, just a digital reset. Clearance reinstated, name unburied. They offered a statement, an official acknowledgement. Even asked if I wanted my service record made public. I declined. "If being seen means others pay the price," I said, "then I'll stay where I'm needed, not where I'm visible." Later that night, Carrara found me at the airstrip. The wind was cold, but her hands were warm as she pressed something into my palm. A silver badge. No rank, no title, just a quiet symbol. "I don't want to wear it," she said softly. "I want to deserve it." I didn't say anything, just hugged her. Tighter than I had in years. Then I handed her a folded note. "Open it when you forget who you are," I said. Inside it read only one line. "Start here." And then I boarded the jet. No fanfare, no cameras, just the hum of engines and the weightlessness of peace. I wasn't running anymore. I was flying. The badge Carrara gave me still sits in a drawer, polished, quiet, untouched. It's not what it symbolizes that matters. It's who gave it to me. And when. After the tribunal, things didn't go back to normal. Because there had never been a normal between us. Just roles. Just silence. But something had shifted. For the first time, Carrara saw me not as the shadow she outgrew, but as the story no one ever told her. She opened the note the next day. I knew the line would confuse her at first. Start here. But that was the point. We all wait for permission to change. Sometimes it comes in a whisper. Sometimes a scar. Sometimes in silence. She found me on base later that week, in the analysis wing, hunched over a spread of maps and signal logs. My work didn't pause just because my name had been cleared. Echo never sleeps. Carrara stood in the doorway for a while before speaking. Was it always this quiet? I looked up. The work? She nodded. Yes, I said, and the life too. She stepped in, arms crossed, not defiant, just guarded. I read the tribunal transcripts again. I arched a brow. Couldn't sleep? She gave a tight smile. Just thinking. About what? I didn't ask. Because I knew. For her, the war had always been loud. Marches, orders, salutes, praise. For me, the war had lived in silence. Covert reports, dead drops, names never spoken aloud. Same uniform, different battlefield. Carrara sat down beside me. not across. Beside. That mattered? I thought I had to be like them, she said quietly. Mom, Dad, the colonels, the plaques. I didn't answer. I didn't know there were other ways to serve. There are always other ways, I said. They just don't make speeches about them. She turned toward me. What happened after you left Iraq? Her voice didn't accuse anymore. It asked. I leaned back in my chair, the memory hitting like a tide I no longer resisted. It was the night I packed my bags, not out of shame, but out of necessity. I'd stared at my reflection in a dorm mirror, wondering who I was without the uniform they forced me to fit. I didn't crack. I woke up, and I walked. I spent 2 weeks in between, no home, no paycheck, sleeping in borrowed cars and public libraries. I kept my head down and my thoughts sharper than ever. Then came the meeting with the echo handler. She found me in a coffee shop in El Paso. No badge, no introduction. Just a note folded beneath a cappuccino. You were never a failure. You were misassigned. Carrara's eyes widened. That's all it said? That's all I needed. The assignment began with 6 months of silent training. Urban evasion, conflict de-escalation, psychological mapping, identity management, language immersion, weapons familiarity only when required. I learned to disappear without running. I learned to be trusted without being known. I learned to hear what people didn't say. And by year 2, I learned what it meant to exist without ever being seen, not just in operations, in life. Carrara sat in silence after I finished. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked in a place I hadn't heard since childhood. Did you ever miss us? My breath caught. I miss the idea of us, I said, but not the reality, because the reality hurt more than the silence. She nodded, once slowly, then whispered, I think I became what they wanted so badly. I forgot to ask myself if I wanted it too. I smiled gently. Then you know where to start. In the weeks that followed, something strange happened. She began showing up, not for optics, not for orders, but for questions. Why don't you wear rank insignia? How do you handle no closure after a mission? What do you do when silence becomes lonely? I didn't always have an answer, but I listened. That I'd mastered. And in between strategy briefs and surveillance reviews, I watched her begin to unlearn the version of herself she thought she had to be. One question at a time. Then came the news. Carrara was being recommended for advanced field command, frontline rotations, international postings. But there was a pause in her application file, a single flagged instance. The tribunal. Someone, probably Vaughn's old allies, hadn't let it die. Even though she hadn't been officially cited, her name had touched classified documents. The algorithm red flagged it, and she was going to be pulled from rotation unless it was cleared. She came to me in full uniform, jaw clenched. They're saying I shouldn't be considered, that I might be compromised. I didn't flinch. Do you want the job? I want the right to decide if I say yes or no, she said, fierce. Then we fix it, I said. We went back into the archives. Together. Frey helped, begrudgingly, but with purpose. We traced the flagged protocols to a ghost ID that had never been purged, Vaughn's old login shell. Still pinging remotely from a node somewhere in Nevada. Buried. Hidden. But not forgotten. To clear Carrara's name, we had to expose the last tendril of Vaughn's digital footprint. It wasn't revenge, it was closure. We tracked the signal to an abandoned satellite operations site west of Henderson. Decommissioned but still live. We drove overnight, 3 hours in silence and desert. When we arrived, the gate creaked like a memory. Inside, dust and rust clung to the air like regrets. We broke in. Legally. Barely. The node was still active, one flickering console and a battered hardline server. Carrara booted it up. I watched her hands, steady now. No tremble, no fear. She traced the code, found the final sequence. A dummy directive. One line. Cassidy? Roar, watchdog. Redundant. Expire by silence. Her lips parted. They wrote you off. I nodded. They wrote me out. She hit delete. The server blinked, then died. No flare. No smoke. Just silence. It's done. I placed a hand on her shoulder. No, you're done. Her record cleared 2 days later. The recommendation went through. She didn't accept it right away. She didn't need to. For once, it was her choice. And that was freedom. Weeks passed. She stopped asking questions. Not because she lost interest, but because she finally understood. Some stories aren't told. They're lived. Quietly. Deliberately. Completely. One morning, a sealed envelope arrived at my door. No name. No stamp. Inside, a photo. Carrara standing at parade rest, silver badge pinned to her chest. Not by ceremony, but by choice. On the back she'd written, "If I ever forget who I am again, I'll start here." You'd think vindication would feel louder, more public, like applause. But when you've built your life in the shadows, even victory whispers. After the tribunal, after the badge, after the deletion of Vaughn's last trace, I didn't celebrate. I recalibrated. Because survival, for people like me, doesn't leave room for parades. But something had changed. Not just with Carrara, with me. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to hide what I did. I still couldn't talk about it. Not really. But I didn't need to pretend I was something I wasn't. No more watered-down explanations at family dinners. No more fake job titles. No more laughing along when people called me the dropout. I was done shrinking to make other people feel comfortable. Carrara wrote to me every week after her reassignment. Not long letters, just quiet check-ins. Observations, frustrations, growth. The field feels different now. I look at people more, really look. I quoted something you once said during a debrief today. No one knew it was you. I saw a girl freeze during drills. I didn't yell. I sat with her after. She was learning not just to lead, but to lead differently. Not with power, with presence. One envelope stood out. Inside was a photo. Carrara in full gear, standing in front of a new crop of recruits. On her chest, the badge. On her face, purpose. Not pride, not performance. Peace. On the back, she'd written, "They asked what echo meant. I told them it was the sound of everything we carry, but never say." That line hit me harder than any commendation ever had, because for the first time, she understood. Not just what I did, who I was. I visited our parents once after everything settled. I didn't tell them in advance, didn't give them time to script a reaction. When my mother opened the door, her mouth hung open for just a second too long. Then, "Oh, Cassidy." Like I was a weather change. Inside, the furniture was the same. The hallway still held only pictures of Carrara. No trace of me. I didn't stay long, didn't explain where I'd been, didn't ask them to understand. I wasn't there for forgiveness, I was there for clarity. Over lunch, my father cleared his throat. "We didn't know," he said flatly, "what you were doing." I nodded. That was the point. He didn't ask more. My mother tried to fill the silence. "We were worried, you know." I smiled softly. "You were embarrassed. That's different." She flinched, visibly, but didn't argue. "We're proud of Carrara," she offered. I am too. That part was true, but what she didn't say told me everything I needed to know. They hadn't changed, not really, but I had. And that meant I no longer needed them to. As I stood to leave, I placed something on the counter. A printed photo, me in uniform being saluted. Not for validation, just as a record. They could throw it away or frame it. But either way, I'd given them the truth. What they did with it was never mine to control. Back on base, I returned to quiet work. Strategic ops, pattern recognition, psychological inference. The world was still chaotic, but inside me, something had steadied. Then came the call. Major Evelyn Shaw, cold as ever, precise, efficient. "We have a recruitment request," she said. "Not unusual. For you to lead it." I frowned. "I'm not a recruiter. This isn't standard." She sent the file, a name, a photo, a 19-year-old girl fresh out of cadet school with a perfect academic record and zero confidence. "She froze during night drills," Shaw said. "Twice." "Why me?" "She cited your tribunal transcripts in her request, said she wanted to understand what it meant to serve in the shadows." That stopped me. Someone had found the story. My story. Not the operation, not the scandal, the quiet truth. And she wanted to learn from it. When I met the girl, Avery Lane, she barely met my eyes, hands fidgeting, voice soft. She said, "They told me I wasn't fit, that I cracked." I nodded. "Maybe you did." Her mouth opened in shock. "But cracks aren't flaws," I added. "They're entry points." She tilted her head. "Entry to what?" "To yourself." We trained in silence. I didn't teach her how to shoot or how to run. I taught her how to sit in stillness, to breathe when her chest tightened, to notice patterns in people, not just actions, but absences. Where others saw breakdowns, I taught her to see thresholds. She was slow at first, but then, one day, she didn't flinch. Not when a gun fired, not when a voice rose, not when she was told she didn't belong. She just smiled and said, "I'll decide that." That's when I knew. Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you unlock in someone else. A month later, Carrara returned for a joint training exercise. Different unit, different uniform, same fire. We didn't embrace publicly, but in the debrief room, after everyone had left, she handed me something, a black folder. "Training proposal," she said, "new cadet division. Focused on resilience, psychological ops, emotional integration." I flipped through it. Her language was precise, but every word traced back to lessons I never taught out loud. "They'll never approve this," I said, though I hoped I was wrong. "They might," she replied, "if you sign it." I looked up. She wasn't asking me to speak. She was asking me to authorize, to give her the tools. I signed. Not because I wanted recognition, because she deserved momentum. She left the next morning, but this time she didn't leave as the golden daughter. She left as someone who'd looked into the abyss I'd lived in and chose to step forward anyway, on her terms. Weeks later, I got a package, a new badge, custom engraved. On the back, "For the ghosts who never needed a spotlight, only a door." And beneath that, "With love from those you train to knock." We talk about legacy like it's something you leave behind, but I've learned legacy isn't a trail, it's a door. And the most powerful thing you can do is leave it unlocked for someone else. The engraved badge Carrara sent sat on my desk for weeks before I touched it. I wasn't avoiding it. I was letting it settle. Because something inside me had shifted. The girl who used to crave proof didn't need permission anymore. But she did need to know it mattered. That she mattered. It had been almost a year since the tribunal. Echo had restructured. Carrara's training program was approved. I'd transitioned fully into high-clearance strategy and cadet mentorship. The world hadn't stopped needing people like me, but for the first time in a long time, it welcomed them. One morning, I was reviewing signal chain debriefs when a knock came. Soft, not protocol. I looked up. Avery Lane, now 2 ranks higher than when we met, stood in the doorway. She looked calm, still, solid. "May I?" she asked. I gestured for her to enter. She sat opposite me, posture straight but not stiff. "I got my placement." I raised a brow. Let me guess. Strategic shadow work?" "Close," she grinned. "Civilian liaison. High conflict zones." My smile was genuine. "You'll be good at it." She hesitated, then placed something on the table. A folder. "You're in it." I flipped it open. The program was modeled after Carrara's prototype, but adjusted. More psychology, more autonomy, less rank obsession. At the bottom, Senior Advisor, Commander Rohr, inactive field. I looked up. "You want me to consult?" She shook her head. "We want you to lead." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood, walked over to the wall of whiteboards behind me, and erased everything. I wrote one word, invisible. Then beneath it, essential. Avery tilted her head. "That the motto?" "No," I said, "that's the truth." She nodded. We launched the unit 3 months later. We called it Shadow Door. It wasn't flashy, no banners, no public statement. Just a door. Unlabeled. Always open. Always quiet. Inside, cadets trained differently. They weren't broken down to be built back up. They were unfolded, layer by layer, until they knew how to move through the world with precision and humanity. Carrara visited one day, not to teach, just to observe. She sat silently in the back as I walked the recruits through a simulation debrief. At one point, a trainee broke down in the middle of a retelling. His voice shook, his breath hitched. I didn't fix it. I didn't tell him to be strong. I let him breathe. Then when he was ready, I asked, "What part of you didn't feel safe today?" And he answered, not with military jargon, but with honesty. "My father's voice was in my head," he whispered, telling me I was weak. "Are you?" I asked gently. He looked down. "No," he said. "I'm just tired of pretending I'm not scared." I nodded. That's where we start. After the session, Carrara approached me. "You don't lead like anyone else I know." "I know," I said. "You lead like you trust them before they earn it." I turned toward her. "Because they've already earned something," I said. "They showed up." She smiled. "You should have been the one they toasted at dinner all those years ago." I shrugged. I wouldn't have shown up anyway. Then I paused. "But if you invite me now..." Her eyes softened. "I will." Months later, the family gathered again. This time, not for promotions, not for medals, just for each other. And I went. Not because I wanted to prove anything, because I didn't need to anymore. At the dinner table, Carrara gave a toast. "To those who wear the uniform with pride," she said, "and to those who serve without ever being seen." Then she raised her glass toward me. "Some of us serve loud. Some of us serve in silence. But all of us are better when we remember who left the door open." No one clapped. Not because they didn't agree, but because they felt it. Even my father nodded once. Even my mother didn't interrupt. Even Aunt Kendra looked down for a long, long time. When dinner ended, Carrara handed me a small wooden box. Inside, the photo I'd once left on the counter. Me in uniform, saluted. Framed, preserved, placed between 2 candles. "We didn't forget," she said. "We just didn't know how to look." I held the photo quietly. I never needed to be seen, I said, just not erased. I walked out onto the porch. The same creaky floorboards. Same smell of propane. But this time, I wasn't on the folding chair. I was in the middle. Among them. Back at Shadow Door, new recruits arrived every week. Every file was different. Some had trauma, some had fear, some just had questions no one had ever answered before. And I met every one of them the same way. Not as Commander Roar, not as a shadow, but as a woman who once sat on a porch, unseen, and decided not to disappear. On my office door, there's a small plaque now. No title, no rank, just a quote. If you ever forget who you are, start here. There was a time I thought being invisible meant I didn't matter. That if no one clapped, no one saw. If no one framed my photo, I didn't belong. But the truth is, the people who shape history the most are often the ones no one ever toasted. I remember the last holiday dinner before I left home. I stood near the fridge, a paper plate in one hand, watching my parents pour wine and praise into my sister like she was a war hero. Because she was. Because she had earned it. And I was just Cassidy. The one who dropped out. The one who couldn't handle the heat. The one who never slammed a door but disappeared behind one. That night I went home, packed my things in silence, and left. No note, no argument, because I already knew the loudest thing I could do was go. For years I built a life that couldn't be Googled. Operations without credit, sacrifices without ceremony, success that lived in the cracks between headlines. I worked in rooms where no one wore rank and everyone carried weight. We weren't thanked, we weren't acknowledged, we were shadows, and we were necessary. But even in those years, between debriefs and cold rooms and extraction maps, I used to wonder, if I died? Would they even put my name in the family tree? Would they remember me as the ghost? Or just pretend I'd never existed at all? That fear shaped me, but it didn't define me. Because fear might whisper, but purpose roars, even in silence. The day Shadow Door inducted its 50th recruit, I stood at the back of the training hall. I wasn't there to speak. I rarely do. But that day, Avery insisted. These cadets need to know where it came from, she said. They need to know you. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I said yes. I stepped up to the front, not in uniform, just in black slacks and a worn windbreaker. No titles, no badges, just me. And I said, you won't hear stories about people like us in parades. You won't see our names etched in stone or listed in shiny recruitment ads. But make no mistake, we are not invisible. We are the reason others come home. We are the bridge no one sees until they fall. We are the ones who keep watch in silence, and sometimes, we are the ones who hold the whole damn thing together. I paused, then I added, they used to say I failed. They used to say I gave up. But I didn't give up. I went deeper. The room didn't erupt. There was no cheer. Just stillness. And then, one by one, cadets stood. Not out of formality, but out of knowing. They had been seen. Later that night, I got a message, encrypted, from Carrara. They promoted me again, but I turned it down, not because I didn't want it, but because I realized I don't need it to feel worthy anymore. I smiled. Then I replied, they never toasted me, but you saw me. That matters more. The next morning, I visited the photo wall at Shadow Door. Not a wall of fame. No medals. Just black and white Polaroids of every person who ever walked through our door. Each one captioned with a word they chose, not what the system gave them. Some said, strong, resilient, unbreakable. Some simply said, enough, I found my photo, the one Avery took years ago, caption, "Not gone." And I stood there longer than I meant to, not in grief, in relief. Because the world that once called me a failure was now being reshaped by people like me. A week later, Shadow Door received its first formal recognition. A quietly delivered citation. No ceremony, just a letter. This unit, founded in silence, has saved more futures than any known record reflects. We see you now. I didn't hang the letter, didn't frame it. I tucked it into the file cabinet, next to a note written years ago that still read, "Start here." That night, at home, I poured a glass of wine, sat on the back porch, the porch where they once put me outside. The folding chair was still there. I didn't sit in it. I brought out a new chair, placed it in the center, then sat down. Because I don't live in their silence anymore. I built my own space, and in it, I am enough. Because sometimes the woman they never toasted becomes the one they build entire programs around. The one they quote. The one they remember not because she was loud, but because she never left. She just waited until the world was finally ready to see her. Thank you for walking with me through the silence, the shadows, and back into the light. If you've ever felt forgotten, I promise you're not alone. Like, share, and follow Stoic Capsule for more stories that don't need applause to matter. To all the invisible leaders, the quiet heroes, the women no one toasted, this story was for you. If it touched you, leave a comment. Let us know where you started.